So I just checked, and the last time we filmed was 12 days ago. And so, this year we've been filming a lot more frequently, and so, but you're filming every few days. It becomes like second nature, and then each time that we don't film for like a week and a half like this, you actually like very quickly get a little rusty, and your nerves shoot up a little bit when you're about to record. So thanks for joining us, guys. If you're new here, I'm Dave. This is Olive, and we appreciate you joining us here at Book Blather. So, quick, just little channel update in that vein is that we these couple months here in the summer they're a little bad for us. We've been recording more this year as we said we would, but right now a number of big life things going on. I'm not going to talk about them all today, but one of which is that my youngest daughter is going to leave for college in 2 weeks. So we are not prioritizing reading or making videos right now. We'll be back to it more frequently in a couple of weeks, but for right now, we're prioritizing other things. So we're still reading, still doing videos, but that's why they're kind of a little few and far between here, and that'll last for a few more weeks. So we kind of totally tanked on Rocket Summer. We are in the middle of August now. We have started reading some garbage, but we're going to tank a little bit on that, which I feel a little bad about because we're co-hosts, but we'll do what we can. But like I said, our priorities are a little different right now. So in the meantime, we have to put a August video up very imminently, so we still have not talked about what we did for Rocket Summer. So we did read some things for Rocket Summer. We failed miserably. We had a list of things we were going to read week by week, and we failed miserably. But we did read a few things. We mostly so the prompts went out the window, but we did read some old things, which was the idea, and a new thing. And so we want to just wrap up what we did read, the sci-fi that we read for Rocket Summer. So the first one that we read, I think we'll just do these in order of like age, since that's basically, we don't have prompts to go by here. So the first one is When the Sleeper Wakes by H.G. Wells. So this was first published in 1899, and it was in serial form. It was published in The Graphic and Harper's Weekly. And this is, I mean, it might look small because of this Ace Classic version of the book, but this is actually full. I mean, the small print inside. This is actually a full-length novel. So it was published over 18 issues when it was first published back in 1899. It was republished in 1910. You'll see this which was the actual original title, When the Sleeper Wakes. It was republished in 1910 as When the Sleeper Awakes. And I think H.G. Wells was going to make some revisions to it and then didn't. I think he got sick or something, so I don't think it actually changed. But basically, what this story is about is, or we read this story because we are fans of 1984, which we think is one of the most important novels ever written, and a big influence on 1984 was Yatin's We, which was published around 1921, I want to say, and around then, and so that was that book had a big influence on 1984, which George Orwell admitted. And so we read that book a few months ago, and then we learned that supposedly this book had an influence on We. And so they all sort of deal with, the totalitarian sort of society, or at least autocratic society to some extent. So how much of an influence this H.G. Wells book really did have on We, I don't know, but I can see why it may have. What this story follows is this main character. His name is Graham, and he is from the late 19th century. I mean, this book was written in 1899, so I think that's about when it's supposed to have started. So late 19th century, and then he falls into this mysterious deep sleep, and so then he wakes up a little over 200 years later. So at the end of this century, basically, right? And so like almost another 100 years from now, and he finds that the world has very much changed, of course. But what he discovers is that based on a couple of things that happened. Somebody that he met right before he fell into this deep sleep, and a relative of his. Each of these individuals, these aren't spoilers, this happens in the beginning. Each of these individuals had some wealth and had nobody to leave it to. So they each left it to him. And this all compounded over 2 centuries. And so when he wakes up, he discovers that he is actually somewhat of a celebrity, and he actually has control of like half of the world because his wealth has built up so much. And so everybody knows who the sleeper is, and people are always wondering if the sleeper will ever wake. And but in the meantime, of course, society moved on, and technology advances, and others come to these sort of aristocratic, I guess, bodies have come to govern things. And I don't want to give too much away about that, but basically the world is run in his stead by these other people. And he wakes up, and the whole world is like they've been like waiting for him to wake up all this time, and he's almost viewed as like a savior. And so it deals with a couple of different things. You know, Politically, it deals with Graham. He ends up waking up essentially just through no volition of his own. Ends up waking up essentially as a king with a tremendous amount of power because he controls so much, well, half of the world's wealth, and so. And he is very popular because so many people have been waiting for him. So Graham kind of ends up being this unintentional leader of this populist movement. But then you also see, it shows you this sort of somewhat of a totalitarian society that's being run, and a revolution, and how revolutions don't always result in what revolutions are supposed to result in, and do you end up with anything better? And so I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to give too much away more than that, but it is interesting in that it deals with these different sort of political, these sort of different political environments that are, none of which are necessarily so great. And so, but it was very prophetic in terms of like the technology and stuff. So this was written in 1899. And a very big part of this story is airplanes, and he has different names for them, but basically these flying machines, and which is pretty impressive, what he describes. And then the invention of television, which he describes, of course, in his own way. So it's and there are other things that we don't really see so much, like how the traffic ways work and everything like that. But it was pretty interesting in that when you consider the time that he was writing it, some of the technological stuff that he prophesized. And it's meant to be like a little bit of a personal adventure story as he's trying to learn about the world and learn about what kind of powers he has and what kind of change he can affect and what kind of change does he want to affect. And so, those are all the things that I think the book is kind of meant to explore. Now, we unfortunately did not like the book all that much. It was a little bit of a bear to get through at times. I don't know if I already said this, but this is, even though it looks small here, it's actually a full-length novel. And so there were points when it was a little bit of a drag to get through. And, we just don't DNF books, so that's why we didn't DNF this book, but we might have if we were DNFers because it got hard at times. And, so I don't want to tell anybody not to read it. I think it did have some interesting issues in it, and it apparently was an important influence on these other important books. But don't expect like a riotous, fun time with it. You know what I mean? It's a serious read, and it's written in language from 125 years ago, which just by itself sometimes, at least for me, can be a little bit of a slog to get through it. So a little bit of a surprise because H.G. Wells wrote, of course, The Time Machine, which we love. It was a great novel. Don't remember having nearly as difficult of a time with it. But I think Wells thought of this, I think, as one of his more serious works. So You take that for what it is. Happy about chat about it further in the comments if you have more questions about it. Okay, the next one was With the Night Mail, which was published in 1905. Like so many of these, also in magazine form. This was published in Windsor Magazine and McClure's Magazine. I think I got those names right. So it was published then in 1905, and then was published a few years later in book form. So With the Night Mail by Rudyard Kipling, and this was a novella, and this was set a very minimal setting that you saw. Basically, this is about there's this international body called, it's like the UN but like for air traffic. Like traffic controls everything. This is obviously projecting way into the future. I think it's projecting to like around our time now, but and so it was projecting that air traffic control. There's this powerful body, the air control board, that or air board of control, something like that controls everything. And you basically see, this is a world where in the future this air traffic is like a lot of sci-fi that you still see today in these sort of where basically flight is by dirigibles. And so this is something that you see come up in really old science fiction, but you even see come up in today's science fiction, like in alternate worlds where it's not airplanes that ended up coming to the forefront of air travel. It's these dirigibles that are the main way of travel. You even see it like even in that television show Fringe from not that many years ago, where you see an alternate Earth, and you see that in a lot of things. I think that was Fringe, or maybe it was Counterpart. Was Counterpart the one that had the dirigibles? Or maybe they both did. It's such a common theme. Anyway, that's what this whole thing was about. This was about this. So you follow this one particular airship, dirigible, that is, it's a postal ship, and they're on this particular run at night, I think, and there's this really bad storm that comes. And so there's a number of different things happen, and you see there's like this Mark boat, this boat that's in trouble, and another boat that's like a cruiser boat, or I keep saying boat. They're dirigibles up in the air, and so you have these different lanes of traffic and different heights, and things happen with these different ships interacting with each other, and that's pretty much all it was about. And so it really kind of sucked, this book, actually. I thought it was a real waste of time. It wasn't that long of a book, and the whole thing was about like details of the dirigibles, and their inner workings and everything, and weather, specifics of the weather and this storm, and how it was affecting these different travel lanes and impacting the ships. So that's pretty much what it was about: dirigible details and weather details. So if you're into either of those things, you might like this story. Otherwise, I thought it was pretty much a waste of time and nothing really happened. There was a sequel to it called what was it called? ABC something, ABC. Easy as ABC. I think that's probably airboard control or something like. We're not reading that. We originally thought we'd read them both because they're short, but we're not reading that because the thing was a real waste of time. So that was that one. So the next one, and this one's jumping forward a little bit, is The Variable Man, published in 1953 by Philip K. Dick. And this one was another novella, and this one also, like so many of these, was also published first in magazine form in Space Science Fiction. And so this actually was kind of an enjoyable story. This wasn't that deep of a story, not a lot of meaning behind it, but so this one also, again, projects into the future, of course. And this one projects into a time where Earth is kind of like a burgeoning power, right? But it has been restricted to our solar system because there is another old but aging power out there. It's called Centaur. What was that called, Al? Do you remember the Centaurian? I don't know, some Alpha Centauri Empire. The Centaurian something. Maybe the Centaurian Empire, I forget. And so, which has expanded across many worlds. So they've been kind of containing Earth to our solar system, and we're anxious to get out. So we're at this war, or having this war with each other. And there is this machine, there's these vast distances and this, time you have to account for. So there's this machine, I think it was called the SRB machine, that was, it was like a predictive machine. And so they were always consulting this machine to determine what their odds were at any given point, based on based on events that were happening, current facts, what their odds were of achieving victory at any given point, or I think maybe in any given place or something, against this intergalactic enemy, and or not intergalactic, but you know what I'm saying, interstellar enemy, and so they consult this thing, and it's supposedly pretty accurate, and they rely on it a lot. But at the same time, there's this parallel, like, little science unit, and I forget what they were called. I think history something. But they would go back in time just to study history, and they had this, like, isolated bubble that would go back. And this thing accidentally brings forward somebody, a man from, I think it was 1913. Our main character, Cole, brings him back into the present. And when that happens, all of a sudden, and this is a very, like, normal, unassuming man he's a craftsman, that travels around in his horse and carriage to fix things. And when he gets brought into the future, the SRB machine goes crazy, and all of a sudden it can't make accurate predictions. It keeps, like, the numbers keep changing, flipping back and forth. It can't make accurate predictions. And, it's no surprise what the variable is, that there's this new variable that makes it not able to predict things. And so this is the variable. That's why it's called the variable man. And so also on Earth, there's this conflict taking place between, like, this lead, I think he was a Polish scientist, and like the head, like, just enforcer guy, like government enforcer guy, and they're in constant conflict. Very, very warlike, even on Earth. And our variable man kind of gets in the middle, and he has some certain just natural abilities, and that's all I can say. I've already said too much, actually. So, but it's a short book, and it's an enjoyable little story. You just can't expect too much out of it, but it was fun. Okay, and then the last one is jumping way ahead in time. This is not old science fiction. This is current science fiction. This is Red Shirts by John Scalzi. So, at least it's science fiction. So we read this one in July because we were buddy reading this with Vin over at Revenant Reads, who has a great channel, does both fiction and nonfiction, and he runs, if you don't know, event in the summer called BookTrek. It's got a more complicated name this year, like The Wrath of BookTrek or something. But anyway, encouraging you to read Star Trek books. So I had wanted to read this. It's not quite a Star Trek book, so I texted Vin and asked him if this qualified for BookTrek, and he said, yeah, and do you want to buddy read it? Because he was going to read it too. So we read this. And what this book is, this was published in 2012. John Scalzi, big science fiction writer. And this was, it was a little different than I thought it was going to be. I thought that this was going to be a Star Trek parody, because if you know anything about Star Trek, every time the ship goes and comes to a new planet, new place, they always send out an away team. And of course, contrary to all logic, the away team always has the couple most important people on it. Captain Kirk, Dr. Spock, and it's always got a couple more people. And then there's always a guy with a red shirt, the no-name guy with the red shirt, and he's always the guy that gets killed, right? So this book is about red shirts, and I thought it was going to be a parody of Star Trek, or more of like a straight parody where it was like the red shirts trying to survive. It was not quite that. It was a little different. It's hard for me to talk too much about it without giving too much away, but basically this was very much a piece of metafiction, where you sort of have narratives. There's these characters in this show, but there's a lot more than that. And there's a couple of layers. So you have this sort of art. I don't want to give too much away, but you have these different, like, mediums, not even just like television mediums. So you have these different mediums, these nested mediums. And that's the most I could say about it. I wish I could say more, but I don't want to because I don't want to spoil it. That was very clever. I thought that part was very clever. But there were a number of downsides of this book that both Vin and I'm glad that I buddy read it with Vin, especially Vin's a little more cerebral than me. You know, he's a teacher. Teachers always are more cerebral than me. My wife is one, but I'm glad I read it with him. That you know was helpful. So you got some comfort because we both had all the same sort of negative reactions to it, but positive and negative reactions to it. We basically, one thing was the problem was the writing. We were both very much surprised that the writing was as poor as it was. Scalzi is a very big science fiction writer. He was the president of the whatever that's Fantasy Science Fiction Writers Association thing and everything, and thought the writing would be better. And it was a lot of it was what were their names? But it'd be like Dahl said, Duvall said, Hansen said, Dahl said, Duvall said, Hansen said, and it was like just over and over and over. It was distracting. It was pretty irritating how bad that was, to the point where I was wondering if like maybe it was on purpose, and it may have been based on this metafiction aspect to it, but I don't think so. And like what Vin had pointed out was part of that was necessary because almost all the characters were the same. It was like the same kind of character. Unless you said Hansen said or Duvall said, you actually wouldn't know who was talking most of the time because most of them had the exact kind of same personality. So, the characterization was not so great in that way. Also, this was a book that relied very much on comedy, especially because of, the subject matter and these red shirts and getting killed and understanding they're getting killed and everything. It very heavily relied on comedy, but a lot of the comedy wasn't that funny. So some of it, here and there, you'd giggle a bit. A lot of times you're kind of rolling your eyes a little bit. It wasn't that great. And then the format of the book was a little odd because you got like 2/3 of the way through the book, and then the story ended. And you had these things at the end that were called codas, that were viewpoints from 3 different people. And they weren't bad, especially the second and third coda. They were kind of neat, but it was like you had this kind of fast-paced story, and the pacing was good in the story. The pacing was very good, very fast-paced. It was one of those ones that was another positive that really like pulled you along, really kept you wanting to keep reading, really like dragged you with it. It was really good in that way. But you get this really fast-paced thing, and then it ends, and you still have like a quarter of the book to go. And so it was like, I was telling Vin, it was kind of like a little bit of a reading hangover because you really didn't want to still read that much afterwards. That was not part of the story. So good and bad. We both had a decent time with it. We were both glad we read it. We both wish we liked it more. We were both expecting it to be better and a little different. And so it wasn't as good as we had hoped. But I'm so glad I read it. It was very, very original concept. You're not going to see another thing like this. It was very, very, the meta aspect of it was very original. So I think it's worth reading, definitely, especially if you're a Trek fan. I think you'd like it. So, okay, so that's all of them. Those were the 4 we read. When the Sleeper Wakes, With the Night Mail, The Variable Man, and Red Shirts. So let us know if you read any of these, and if there was anything you read, we kind of dropped the ball on Rocket Somerville. If there's anything you read that you really enjoyed that you would recommend to us, let us know. We'd love to hear it because, of course, we do like science fiction. So, all right. If you don't have anything substantive you want to say, you can always leave Olive a puppy emoji. She always likes to see those. So, there are more videos coming. Like I said, it just might be a little choppy for the next few weeks, but we are still reading. We're still doing videos. We do have some more things that we have to do as quick as we can. But thanks for your patience. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you again very soon. But in the meantime, take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll see you next time.